What up, everybody? Welcome to the Alex Leak and Friends NFL Podcast, 2018 Offseason Week 4. Back once again. I got the crew with me. I got David Stoyo in Canada.
Hello, how's it going?
And I got Gavin Heslop in Oregon.
1, 2, 3, 4.
All right, let's get to it. We've got a ton to talk about. Free agency hit, all that. Let's start with the Seahawks releasing Richard Sherman, Jeremy Lane, Deshaun Shedd, reshaping their roster. They do extend corner Justin Coleman after his 2 picks and 2 touchdowns last season. Stoyo, what do you make of the Seahawks cleaning house? Do you think they're making some smart moves?
Personally, I don't like what they have been doing. I would have given that team at least another or 2 years chance. I would have held on for a bit. But they decided to do it now. They're being very aggressive about it. So we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, some pretty crazy moves. Gavin, what do you think of, most importantly, getting rid of Sherman?
Yeah, I think they definitely are regretting letting Sherman go now that he's going to be facing them twice a year. And they know Sherman better than anyone, and they are going to know that he's going to prepare extra hard in the weeks leading up to those Sundays to make sure that he makes them regret their decision. It's strange seeing their defense fall apart so quickly, even in just the roster spots. So unless they know that guys that they've re-signed, such as Bradley McDougald, can take the place of these guys that they're trading or releasing, they might be in trouble, especially if they continue to not protect Russell Wilson.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy what they're doing. Also getting rid of Jimmy Graham. Speaking of Richard Sherman, the 49ers pick him up. They sign him to a 3-year deal worth $39 million. And he'll get to play 2 games a year at least against his old team. Sherman says, I'm vengeful that way. So it seemed that he definitely had that on his mind. He wants to get back at Seattle. Browns left tackle Joe Thomas says Sherman's ego got in the way of a better contract. Stoyo, do you think it was a bad move by Richard not to hire an agent and just go with pretty much the first team that offered him a contract?
No, I think he went with San Francisco because he wanted to stay within the division.
Yeah.
He's taking that cut by Seattle very personally, so now he's going to try to go back at them.
Do you think that he could have gotten more with an agent? Like, a lot of guys are making a big deal about not hiring an agent.
I mean, if you believe that you're saving those 3% by not hiring an agent, but agents are known for getting better deals than players are, because that's what they do, and they have experience doing that. But if his point was just to go and stay in the division, he didn't really need a lawyer an agent on this contract. Possibly the next one, I would hire representation, but...
Yeah. Yeah, and speaking of the Niners, I mean, John Lynch is showing once again that he's aggressive, and he's certainly turning that team around quick. Gavin, what do you make of Sherman's decision-making here to, he went to Stanford, he's familiar with the West Coast, but he seems, his quote, I'm vengeful that way, he seems to want to stick it to Seattle. What do you make of his thinking here?
Well, there were reports that came out that there were actually a handful of teams that he went to and talked to before he signed with the 49ers. The first being the Seahawks, because their owner had said that he was interested in re-signing him. But when Sherman went in and talked to him and said, this is what I want, he said that it was a little too rich for what they're wanting to offer. And he got the same response from the Raiders as well as the Lions. He spoke to both those teams, presented this offer, and they said it was too rich for their blood. And so then he went with the 49ers, who were willing to sign him for that. And to me, it's it's a no-brainer. If the reports I'm reading are correct, it's a 3-year deal for just under $40 million, which is a lot for a cornerback, but there's only $3 million guaranteed in his contract, so it's very incentive-laden.
Yeah.
And so if you can get Richard Sherman at his peak for, what ends up being, 13, 14 mil a year, in the age where you need a shutdown corner, that's a pretty dang good deal. So I think it's good on the 49ers to take the risk. To me, with that little guaranteed money, it's a no-brainer. So I'm a little unsure why other teams would have taken it. But it'll be really interesting to see those NFC West games play out this year.
Yeah, and speaking of that, I read somewhere that the only way Richard Sherman gets the full $39 million is if he plays in 16 games for all 3 seasons of that deal. The more likely scenario is that he gets around 27 mil. And then, like you said, only 3 mil guaranteed. So I feel like it's definitely a smart move for San Francisco. And you got to give John Lynch props. The Niners also informed linebacker Elvis Dumervil that they will not pick up his team option, and he will hit the free agent market. A big signing here. This is a crazy sign. The Vikings signing Kirk Cousins to a 3-year, $86 million deal, which is fully guaranteed. The first fully guaranteed contract in NFL history. Solid move for Minnesota. I would think that this makes them contenders in not only the division, but in the NFL. They're trying to get back to the Super Bowl. Stoyo, what do you think of the Vikings bringing in Kirk Cousins?
That's a great move for Minnesota. They fixed their biggest issue coming into the offseason. So that sends them right into the top 3 or 4 teams in the NFC again.
Yeah, and in our division, it's going to be difficult playing them 2 times a year.
Yeah, it's not what you want to see as a Bears fan. Another good QB in the division, but that's what happens.
Yep, and they'll have Dalvin Cook coming back as well at running back. Gavin, what do you make of this, of Kirk Cousins going there?
I think it was the right move for him as far as going someplace where he wants to win. We talked about that in podcasts in the past.
Yeah, you called it.
Just seemed like the best fit. He's got the best receiving talent around him of all the other places that were going to be able to pay him the money he was looking for. He could have gone to teams that had a smaller cap amount, such as the Cardinals, and had some solid talent around him. But the Vikings definitely had the most of what he was looking for between a balance of money and talent to win on both sides of the ball. So I think the most interesting thing to me about this contract is that it was fully guaranteed.
Yeah.
There were some players that came out, such as Doug Baldwin of the Seahawks, that said good for Cousins for doing what he did and be a hero to all these other players, and hopefully they'll believe in themselves and demand fully guaranteed contracts in the future as well, which I'm not sure how I feel about that, because I definitely feel that oftentimes the players will get they'll get the short end of the stick with these contracts that the NFL currently is handing out. But on the other hand, you see in these other sports where the contracts are all fully guaranteed, where franchises get crippled by these contracts that are carrying on because suddenly the player gets hurt, or they don't live up to their potential, or they are a flash in the pan kind of player, and then suddenly they don't perform like they had been. And in the NFL, I think that those injuries that are going to take someone out are going to happen more often than these other sports. So it could be pretty detrimental for the league, I think, to have all the contracts be fully guaranteed, especially if you just keep paying them the amount that they are. But this is also a shorter contract, only 3 years. Which is a little surprising to me. I think that the Vikings would want to lock up a little bit more, but maybe that was the trade-off for making it all guaranteed.
Yeah, and I think this is a landmark deal for the Players Union. I think that to get the first official fully guaranteed contract, it may not be great for the owners, but the players have been fighting the union, the CBA for years, forever, and they're trying to make strides and help themselves out in the future. And this is the first fully guaranteed deal, so maybe they'll get some more going forward. I think it's a big deal. A great job by Kirk Cousins to get that deal. And he should have success in Minnesota. I think it's a real good fit, like you said, Gavin. Um,
He almost got that John Gruden money.
yeah. All right. The New York Jets are finalizing a 1-year deal with quarterback Teddy Bridgewater, and they also agreed to terms with Josh McCown at quarterback for a 1-year deal at $10 million. The Jets told Josh McCown that he's expected to start. Also, the Jets are expected to sign corner Tremaine Johnson on a deal worth around $15 million a year. Stoyo, how do you feel about the Jets' moves?
They've done some solid moves.
Mm-hmm.
You had to kind of sign Josh McCown as your bridge QB, and I expect the Jets to also draft a QB at the 6th spot in the upcoming draft. You just have to rebuild slowly when you missed out on Kirk Cousins.
Yeah.
And I don't know what you could have done. Maybe offer him slightly more money. But yeah, it's difficult when you do not receive the person you're interested in.
Yeah, I think that they're addressing all scenarios, though. I think that they did a good job bringing back McCown, a veteran, good bridge quarterback. Then they bring in Bridgewater, who's a little bit of a project coming off an injury. And then, yeah, if you go draft a quarterback at 6 or get a quarterback in the draft, then, you can build around him in the future. So, decent moves. Gavin, what do you think of what the Jets are doing? Also bringing in a guy like Tremaine Johnson that should shore up their defense.
Yeah, definitely going to help out their secondary, which was pretty abysmal this last year. So a good move on their part. Although the reports I'm seeing, it's going to be about $15 million a year.
Yeah.
Which I feel is pretty steep for a corner. He definitely is talented, but he's had some injury issues. And the Rams they opted to not re-sign him or to franchise him. So that makes me wonder if maybe they felt he wasn't worth the money, or maybe there's some other issues. But the Jets, they need to. They weren't a great team, and they need to. Even though the record was way better than I thought it was going to be last year, but they definitely need to add more talent, and I think it's a good move signing both McCown and Bridgewater. I agree with Stoyo. I think they're going to draft a QB, but having these two quarterbacks that they both have starting experience, and assuming that Bridgewater is fully healthy, can step in and start this year. This might be one of the first times where we see a quarterback drafted in the top 10 and not see them play in the first year, which I'm actually a fan of. I think that the quarterbacks this year, a lot of them could really benefit from some time on the bench, watching some veterans, kind of soaking it all in and learning before getting out there and getting hit by an NFL linebacker. So I think they're making some smart moves, and hopefully they can help make the AFC East a bit more competitive.
Yeah, I hope so. It's always good when the Jets when at least the division's competitive, and it hasn't been very competitive in recent years. The Panthers trade cornerback Daryl Worley to the Eagles in exchange for wide receiver Torrey Smith, a good weapon addition for Cam Newton. The Eagles also released veteran tight end Brent Selleck, saving themselves $5 million in cap. And the Eagles also add veteran defensive end Haloti Ngata. Stoyo, how do you feel? Do you think Torrey Smith is a good fit with Cam Newton in that offense?
Definitely. Cam Newton needed more weapons. Definitely needed some speed.
Yeah.
So that's always going to be good for Cam. And I do like the fact that the Eagles are still continuing to try to improve their team, even though they just won the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot rest in the NFL. You always have to try to get better.
Yeah, and Gavin, what do you think of Torrey Smith? And then what do you think of Haloti Ngata? I know you saw a lot of him in Detroit.
Yeah, I think it's a good acquisition for the Panthers. I think they missed Ted Ginn, and having a speed receiver to help with Cam Newton, because they haven't had that since he left. And between Kelvin Benjamin and Devin Funchess, those aren't really speed guys. They're more size guys, and so Torrey Smith adds that one of those speedy, I drop a lot of passes weapons, so they'll go back to that. And Nada, the defensive line in Philadelphia is just getting ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it's actually a perfect situation for Nada. Being a Lions fan, I definitely saw plenty of him. Well, I didn't see as much as him as I wanted to over the last few years, though. He's had some issues with injuries, which I think is the reason why Baltimore was willing to part ways with him. When he's in the game and when he's healthy, he's still talented. He's still a great run stuffer and has the ability to get after the passer a little bit. But on that defensive line with guys like Fletcher Cox, he doesn't have to start. He doesn't have to play every down. So maybe he can stay healthy a little bit longer and be able to rotate in and out and keep that line fresh. So I think this is a great move by Philly. And yeah, completely agree with Stoyo. You gotta stay hungry. You gotta look to be that first team to repeat in a while.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good veteran presence to bring into the line that's already loaded and deep as it is. So can't argue with that move. The Raiders meet with free agent running back Doug Martin, expected to give him an offer. This might be an early indication that Marshawn Lynch may not be returning. We'll see how that goes in Oakland. I know Gruden wants him back, but Doug Martin is a serviceable back. Also, Oakland signs defensive tackle Justin Ellis to a 3-year deal worth more than $15 million and $16 million guaranteed. So you said a couple weeks ago that Doug Martin probably still had some left in the tank, and it looks like he's going to have an opportunity in Oakland.
Yeah, but if I was a Raiders fan, I'd rather have Marshawn back.
Yeah. Yeah, it depends on Marshawn if his head's in the game or not, if he still wants to do it. I mean, he retired not that long ago, too. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, for sure, but I think Gruden could get the best out of him and maybe could talk him into having a few more seasons. I think Marshawn has always had an issue with self-motivation.
Yeah.
He needs to have a player's coach like Pete Rose to get the best out of him.
Yep. Gavin, what do you think of the Raiders' moves?
I think that the Doug Martin signing is a solid one. He's still relatively young for a running back. I think he still has some gas in the tank. And if I don't know that I'd trust him to be my starter, but they do have a good offensive line there. They do have an offense that can take the pressure off of him. So I think that might allow him to flourish a bit more than he did in Tampa Bay. But I think that if I were a Raiders fan, I would also hope that Marshawn comes back so that you have him as the starter and maybe put in Martin as a third down back kind of situation.
Yeah, I agree. I think that would be the ideal situation, especially if you can get Marshawn Lynch to come back hungry and get that Raiders team trying to contend and get a Super Bowl. The Bengals will not pick up veteran corner Adam Jones' option, but they say they want him back to compete for nickel and kick return positions. So we'll see how that goes. A big contract, the Tampa Bay Bucks and star wide receiver Mike Evans agreed to a 5-year contract extension worth $82.5 million and $55 million guaranteed, making him now the second highest paid receiver in the game behind Steelers' Antonio Brown. The Bucks also are bringing back corner Brent Grimes on a 1-year, $10 million deal. And they also agreed to a new 6-year, $41 million deal with tight end Cameron Brate with $18 million guaranteed. Tampa Bay putting a lot into their receiving core. Do you think these are smart moves, Stoyo?
I do. Every player that you mentioned that they've re-signed are good players.
Yeah.
And I'm a huge fan of Mike Evans.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's going to give, what's his name?
Jameis.
A great wide receiver that he can build on their chemistry that they already have for the next few years.
Yep, I agree completely. What do you think, Gavin?
I like the Mike. He's a talented receiver, and you've got to keep him there if you want your young quarterback to flourish. He hasn't really produced quite like people expected him to, but I think some of that can fall onto onto Winston, so I don't know. I'd hold all of that against Evans himself. The Brett Grimes signing was a good one. It was only a 1-year deal, so which is good for a 35-year-old cornerback. He's still very talented, and worst case scenario, he doesn't pan out this year, and there's no future repercussions for the Bucs. The Cameron Brate signing really confuses me, honestly. He's a talented tight end, but they just spent a first round pick on O.J. Howard this last offseason.
Yeah.
And now they've signed Cameron Brate to a 6-year deal. O.J. Howard is also a very talented tight end, and you have to wonder whether they'll just be running a bunch of 2 tight ends formations, or whether they don't think that Howard is capable of being the only starting tight end for them. So it's a little confusing to give that much money to a tight end that's a better blocker than he is a receiver. But again, I guess if they're going to run the 2 tight end set, then this makes a little bit more sense. But still a little confusing to me.
Yeah, and I'll say this. I did see that some Bucs fans were a little confused by the move, signing Brate. And I know that Cameron Brate's been one of Jameis Winston's favorite targets. If you look at the numbers, him and Mike Evans have gotten the most, especially red zone targets. But if you look at the stats, Brate has his numbers did go down last year, and his catch percentages are not that high for a tight end. Usually tight ends have a pretty high catch percentage, and his is like sitting around 60%. And then, yeah, to your point, O.J. Howard was considered possibly the best tight end prospect ever coming out of the drafts, and seems like he would be the perfect guy to build around. But yeah, I guess they're looking for the 2 tight end system. I know that Winston likes to use the tight ends a lot, so we'll see how that goes. Hopefully it works out for Tampa. I'd like to see them have some success, and I'm always rooting for Jameis Winston. On Friday, the Cleveland Browns go a little crazy. They start off with a big trade of 2 draft picks, a 7th and a 4th round, to the Dolphins in exchange for wide receiver Jarvis Landry. Got to be a good move for Cleveland. They didn't have to give out much to get him. And you get a guy who led the NFL in catches in 2017. And the Browns are expected to negotiate a long-term deal with Landry. Stoyo, do you think this is a smart move for Cleveland?
Sure.
Yeah.
Didn't give up that much for him. He's a pretty good receiver, and hopefully they can sign him at a reasonable contract.
Yeah, and now you're looking at a receiving core of possibly Josh Gordon, Corey Coleman, and Jarvis Landry, which is a pretty nasty receiving core. What do you think about the move, Gavin?
Yeah, this is a great acquisition by the Browns. Like you said, they didn't give up very much. A 4th rounder and a 7th rounder next year.
Yeah.
Which is pennies on the dollar for a wide receiver of Landry's talent. The Dolphins kind of shot themselves in the foot here by franchising him, and also with the news already being out that Landry did not want to be there, and that he wasn't wanting to be there either. And that they didn't want him.
Yeah.
I think I covered all my bases there. So, when that kind of situation, the trade market goes really, really flat. You don't get a whole lot for him. My understanding is that had they simply let Landry go in free agency, they would have gotten a 3rd round compensatory pick for him. So technically, they get a 4th rounder that's a few picks after what the 3rd round pick would be, and then the 7th rounder next year. So I guess you might be able to say they got a little bit more than they would have had they not, but honestly, this trade makes their GM look like quite the fool in my mind. So I guess that doesn't really matter in the scheme of things, but in the end, the Browns got a solid slot receiver and a great weapon for their new quarterback, and the Dolphins are hoping that Devontae Parker will blow up this next year.
Yep. Yeah, it's going to be up to Parker and Stills. We'll see. I mean, the Dolphins don't always make the smartest of moves, so we'll see how it goes. Cleveland, then, that was just the beginning. After that, the Cleveland trades a 3rd round pick to the Bills for, as you mentioned, their new quarterback, Tyrod Taylor. They're still expected to take a quarterback in the draft, but Taylor should be a much better bridge quarterback than, say, the Bears had with Mike Glennon. So, Tyrod Taylor, he's going to have some weapons. I would think a better receiving core here in Cleveland than he did in Buffalo. Gavin, do you think Tyrod Taylor's a good fit for the Browns?
Yeah, I think so, especially if they take Barkley first overall. I think that for Taylor to thrive, you're going to want to have a solid running game as well. And I think those two will actually be able to feed off each other, where his mobility will allow the running game to thrive a bit more. But I think that without a solid running game, you're going to have to rely on Taylor's arm, and he's never been known as a guy that can win games by chucking the ball down the field. So I think it's a good situation for them. They can win some games with him, but I don't feel that he's the long-term solution, and maybe I'm guessing the Browns don't either, and we'll see them take a quarterback with the fourth pick this year.
Yeah, and I was pretty adamant that I thought that they were going to take A.J. McCarron or get him, and so I'm definitely wrong on this one. I didn't see Tyrod Taylor ending up in Cleveland. Stoyo, what did you think of this move? Is it a good move, a smart move by Cleveland?
Absolutely, I'm a huge fan of this move.
Yeah.
Now they don't have to draft a QB as their first pick. You can pick up Barkley as your number one, and he is such a good running back. That would be a game changer.
Mm-hmm. And I
think, as Gavin mentioned, that he's a great bridge QB, and you can actually win some games.
Yeah.
He's gonna get you at least 5 victories, I think, and you may actually even win more with him.
Yeah.
And then you can sit your prized pick at 4, whoever's left out of the top 5 QB. You just draft him and let him sit. Potentially, he could even sit 2 seasons.
Yep. Yeah, the Browns have turned things around pretty quickly. They're looking a lot better. Colin Cowherd was not enthused. He said a lot of moves, but not much impact, and he doesn't expect the Browns to be any good again next year. I disagree. You have a pretty solid receiving core now. Quarterback that just led the Bills to the playoffs. And then if you take Barkley at the number 1 pick, I mean, you're looking at a pretty complete roster, at least on the offensive side of the ball. Another good move, in my opinion, they get rid of DeShone Kizer, who was a turnover machine for them last year. They send him to the Packers, and they bring in a pretty good, reliable corner in Demarius Randall. Also swapping 4th and 5th round picks with Green Bay. Stoyo, do you like the move to get rid of Kizer and bring in Randall?
I absolutely do. The Browns improved a lot over the past 48 hours.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what you want to have from your new GM if you're a Cleveland fan. And hopefully this is finally the light at the end of the tunnel and they can start winning games. One victory over the past 2 seasons has to be really rough for your fan base. So no one wishes that upon anyone. So let's get back out there and win some games.
Yep. Gavin, do you think that Demarius Randall is a good addition to the secondary?
Absolutely. The Browns needed some help, and after getting rid of Joe Hayden last season, he was the Packers' best cornerback last year, probably. And so they get rid of a player that they assumed they didn't need anymore once they got Taylor, and again assuming they draft one, and they get someone that can help out and start right away for them. So overall, quite a few solid moves by the Browns GM so far. I think they traded a little too much for Taylor. I think a third was a little bit pricey for a bridge quarterback when you could have signed one of the other relatively talented guys to a 1 or 2 year deal and not given up a 3rd round pick, which for them is really high. It's almost a 2nd round pick. But overall, it's good to see the GMs making what, at least on paper, look like solid moves.
Yeah, I think that's what Cleveland fans want to see most. GM Sashi Brown being aggressive, making some moves. Yeah, you go 0-16, but that's the bottom, and let's build a team and get better quickly. And Seems to be making some smart moves. On Saturday, the Browns did trade away defensive tackle Danny Shelton and a fifth-round pick to the Patriots for a third-round pick. So lots of moves for Cleveland. A busy weekend. Here's another story. This is a pretty crazy story that broke. Giants wide receiver. The Giants are aware of a video posted on social media showing star wide receiver Odell Beckham Jr. Smoking what appears to be a blunt in a hotel room, and a woman next to him cutting up lines of what appears to be cocaine. Not a great look for the star wide receiver who was hoping for a long-term contract this offseason. Fox Sports analyst and Hall of Fame wide receiver Chris Carter was very critical of Odell Beckham, saying he's, quote, incredibly disappointed and it's time to grow up, end quote. But other former wide receivers come to Beckham's defense. Nate Burleson tweets, like we're all angels, word, don't throw stones. And former wide receiver Nate Washington tweets, if only there were camera phones back in Chris's young days. It's hard not to laugh at that. Gavin, what do you think of Odell Beckham's, first of all, his decision making here?
I'm not sure who was recording that video, and I was a bit late to the party, so I'm not sure exactly where it was posted to. But if he posted that to his own account or allowed somebody to post that to his account, that's a pretty stupid move. As far as what he was actually doing, I think that I'm more in line with what the former Nates or current Nates, former receivers say. I think this is really a non-story. It might look bad, but I don't think that anything's going to come out of it. And I think there's a lot of other players doing a lot worse things, and they just don't have as big a reputation, and they aren't as talented as Beckham, and so no one cares about the stuff they do on the side.
Exactly, I agree with you 100%. I believe that there's other wide receivers out there doing the same thing. The only difference is they're not recording it and putting it on social media for everyone to see. People make mistakes. People do stuff. These especially a star receiver of Beckham's caliber, he's going to be out there. That's pretty much what I predicted he'd be doing in the offseason. Out partying, hanging out with models, doing what he does. But you just can't have a video like that up on social media, especially if you're looking for a long-term deal and a lot of money. Stoyo, what do you think of this whole situation?
I think he needs to be a little bit more careful when he's out and about.
Yeah.
And he needs to let people know that are partying with him that no cell phones, no social media. If you want to hang out in my hotel room, you have to give your cell phone to my security officer or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I would just make sure that nothing is being recorded and posted online.
Yeah, or where's Odell's entourage here? Where's a member of his crew making sure that stuff doesn't get recorded or something? You just like to see it handled better.
And I'm not condoning what he did or did not allegedly.
Yeah.
But it's just you need to make sure you have people looking out for your best interest, and you cannot have that nowadays.
Yeah, and
hates having any kind of scandals, and that will cost you money.
Yeah, and I believe this is the same Chris Carter that said not too long ago that you need to have a fall guy in these kind of situations. So Chris Carter has had his own issues off the field going back to his early days in the league. So, like Nate Burleson said, don't throw stones. Giants also released corner Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie, freeing up $6.5 million in cap space. DRC was asked to take a pay cut but declined. And his numbers in 2017 took a big drop. Even though he appeared in 15 games, he registered 0 interceptions and just 1 pass defensed. Gavin, what do you make of Rodgers-Cromartie?
I think it was a good move by the Giants to cut him. He was costing them a lot of money and not producing on the field. So I think it was a solid move on their part. And I think that he'll still be able to sign somewhere. Someone will still pick him up. He's He's young enough, and he has the talent. I think that he'll probably just have to take that pay cut somewhere else, but maybe he's looking to go to a more competitive team anyways and wasn't about to take a pay cut to play for a team that he, in his mind, isn't going much of anywhere, which I think most of us feel that's where the Giants are at this point. So,
Yeah.
Good move by the Giants, and honestly good on Cromartie for standing his ground and saying, I'm not taking a pay cut. This is what you promised to pay me. So,
Yeah. Stoyo, the Chargers signed Pro Bowl corner Casey Hayward to a 3-year extension worth $36 million, $20 million fully guaranteed. According to Pro Football Focus, Hayward had the best corner performance of the season last year on Thanksgiving at the Cowboys while guarding Dez Bryant. Bryant was held to only 2 catches for 19 yards. Hayward recorded 2 passes defensed and an interception. And Prescott's passer rating when throwing at Hayward was 11.3. Do you think the Chargers is a smart move to bring back a guy like Casey Hayward?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He's one of the top corners in the game, and to extend him for a decent
3
payday,
years?
I don't think
Yeah.
it was anything crazy, but yeah, you have to re-sign the talent that you have and not overthink some easy moves like that.
Yep. Yeah, it's going to be a good weapon for the Chargers. Gavin, are you a Casey Hayward fan? You think it's a smart move?
absolutely. I hated him, or playing against him, I should say, when he was in Green Bay, and was happy to see him leave the division.
Yeah.
And it's a great move by the Chargers. It's about $12 million a year over 3 years for a guy that's only 28. So he still probably has at least 3 solid years left. And they've got another young, talented corner, Jason Barrett, that's had some injury issues. So good on them to sign their talent, keep their guys in house, and also make sure they have some consistency at a position where they've been dealing with a little bit of inconsistency as far as who can be on the field. So great move by the Chargers.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, the Chiefs expected to release veteran defensive end Tamba Hali, and they signed wide receiver Sammy Watkins to a 3-year, $40 million deal. That brings, that's a lot of weapons for Patrick Mahomes there with Watkins, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, Kareem Hunt. So that should still be a pretty good Chiefs team. Do you like the moves bringing in Sammy Watkins, Stoyo?
Not at that price.
Yeah.
I think that's like way too much for him. He's just came off a down year, one of the worst years of his career. So I don't know if I'd be willing to pay him, what was it, 14 mil per year?
Yeah.
About 16.
16, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's a little bit out there for me. He's a decent receiver, but I wouldn't call him elite by any means. And I don't know. I haven't bought into Patrick Mahomes yet. I think it was a mistake getting rid of Alex Smith so quickly. So I don't think that's a good move.
Well, if I'm the Chiefs, I'm going to work him in slowly. Yeah, he's got weapons, but I'm going to use Kareem Hunt more. I don't know why the Chiefs didn't use Kareem Hunt a lot. He was a rookie. He was destroying the league. And if they had used him more in the playoffs, they would have, gone further into it. Gavin, do you think that Watkins is a good fit? And do you believe in Mahomes going forward this year?
I think that it's a good move by the Chiefs to try and make sure that there's some talent around their new young quarterback. They lost Albert Wilson in free agency to the Dolphins, and so now they've made sure that they added another talented receiver for Mahomes. Watkins has definitely underperformed for what people expected of him, and I know he definitely dealt with some injury issues when he was in Buffalo. But I think the biggest concern is that he wasn't able to push past Robert Woods or Cooper Kupp this past season when he was there in not St. Louis, Los Angeles.
Yeah.
So that's between the injuries and that, which I know that some people they say that's because he didn't have the rapport with Jared Goff that these other guys had because they'd been there for longer, which that definitely could be true, but the injury history alone would prevent me from signing him to that big of a contract. But if he can pan out and play like he did a couple years ago when he got over 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns, I think that you can definitely get something out of him. And he's still young. He's a fast receiver, so now they've got 2 speedsters on the outside, and I think we're going to see a lot of long bombs from Mahomes this year.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Andy Reid does with that crew and how he brings Mahomes along and develops him. The Arizona Cardinals released veteran running back Adrian Peterson, and I think that was expected. They saved $750K on the cap. And then they go and sign 2 statues at quarterback. They bring in quarterback Sam Bradford on a 1-year, $20 million deal with $15 million guaranteed, which is amazing to me. Bradford just keeps bringing in the money. And then they agreed to a deal with quarterback Mike Glennon to supposedly be the backup. Stoyo, how are you feeling about these quarterback moves in Arizona?
I would not want to be a Cardinals fan right now and have those 2 QBs coming in. Yeah, that does not bring me any satisfaction to have those 2 guys competing for one job. I don't know why Bradford keeps getting paid ridiculous amounts of money for 8 games a year usually.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wouldn't have him on my roster right now.
Gavin.
For Glennon, he's just terrible. He should not even be a 3rd string quarterback.
Yeah, he did absolutely nothing in Chicago for us, and haven't been a believer of Glennon since he came into the league. Gavin, do you think these are smart moves for the Cardinals? Getting at least a veteran. Do you think Sam Bradford and Fitzgerald can maybe get a rapport, or how do you see that going?
I think it can go really well, actually, but it all depends on if Bradford can stay on the field. Like Stoyo said, he usually doesn't play that many games, and you're looking at paying someone $15 million at least this year in order to have him on your roster. It was definitely a good move on their part, I think, to sign him to only a 1-year deal, so that if he does get hurt, which I think we're all expecting, the franchise is not crippled by the move. But I think some people might forget that he was outstanding in the 1 game that he played fully this last year, when he torched the New Orleans defense, which we found out as the season went on was a lot better than I think people really thought. There in week 1, almost 350 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks. That's someone that definitely deserves $15-20 million a year if they can do that, consistently. So I think it was a good move by them. They might be drafting a quarterback this offseason, and if that's the case, they'll need somebody that can show them the ropes, at least for 1 game, hopefully more than just a half. And so I think it's a smart move in Glennon. I don't know the details of that contract, but I'm assuming that it's nothing near what the Bears gave him. And if that's the case, then at that point it's just depth, and you've got someone that has some starting experience. Again, assuming that Bradford goes down, you at least have someone that knows what they're doing to an extent, and your rookie can come in, after the fans call for Glennon's head after the first 3 interceptions in the first quarter.
Would you guys care to take a stab at how much Sam Bradford has made thus far in his career?
150.
Ooh, close. That was a tad overshot, but he's getting paid for sure. What do you think, Gavin?
Well, if you said 150 is a little too high, I'll go with 180 then.
No, I mean, I mean less.
I would guess 135.
Yeah, I think you're right on. It's like 137, I believe. 137 million.
I think he was the last quarterback to be taken first overall with the old rookie weight, well, the lack of rookie weight scale, I should say.
Yeah, I think he got 28 mil on that first contract. Or 28 mil a year or something like that in his first contract. Speaking of getting paid, the Saints keep quarterback Drew Brees and give him a 2-year, $50 million deal. Drew Brees said in a radio interview that one team had offered him $60 million guaranteed, but he took the lesser amount to stick in New Orleans with the city and his familiar surroundings, stick it out with Sean Payton. And if you look at it, he pretty much was really close to being in the NFC Championship last year, so figures why not give it one more run. Stoyo, do you think Drew Brees made the right decision staying home in New Orleans?
Yeah, I think he did, and he even tried to make it sound like a $50 million contract was a bargain. So
Yeah.
great move there too. But
Yeah.
yeah, it makes sense. It'd be nice to see Drew Brees have another run. I thought it was going to be the case this previous postseason, but as Case Keenum had something to say about that, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it would be pretty fitting to see Brees go out on top, get a ring, and retire on top. I wouldn't mind seeing that. And he's been so loyal and done so much for the city. It's nice to see him stick around in New Orleans. Gavin, do you think that's a good move?
Yeah, I think it was a smart move on his part. We saw a much more balanced offense for the Saints this last offseason, not relying on him like they used to. And their defense made some steps forward. Got some great young corners there, and a young safety who's really good except for the last play of a playoff game.
Yep.
So, so yeah, I think that it was a smart move on his part. I'm not sure where the other offer was, but for someone like Brees, who's made a good chunk of money over their years in the NFL, I would think that winning was more important than making extra money. And I think he's got a better chance there than I'm going to assume any place that can offer $60 million guaranteed, unless that was the Vikings. Which, if that was, thank God he stayed in New Orleans. I do not want to see him twice a year.
Absolutely. The Dolphins are releasing star defensive tackle Ndamukong Suh, and Miami would listen to trade offers, but it's highly unlikely due to his contract. Expected to be highly sought after in free agency. And the Dolphins also improved their receiving game by bringing in former Patriot receiver Danny Amendola to the Dolphins. Gavin, you saw Ndamukong a lot in Detroit. Do you think it would be a team should take Suh? Do you think that he's still got some left and can be a big part of a defense?
Yeah, I think so. I definitely think he deserves a contract about half the size, though, of what he got when he went to Miami.
Yeah.
I was so excited that the Lions didn't re-sign him for that size of contract, because the defensive tackle position is not worth that percentage of your cap space. He's definitely an extremely talented player, and for the most part, he stayed out of the limelight for kicking and throwing and punching and all those things. Well, I mean, there was that, but for the most part, he stayed. He was it was pretty uneventful there in Miami. I still think that he has the ability to be a contributor on the defensive line as a starting tackle, but I think that someone's going to probably overpay for him.
Yeah. Stoyo, I heard some Bears fans saying that possibly some Bears fans saying that they would want to bring in Ndamukong Suh to the Bears. Does that interest you at all? And I'm with you. On the record, I'm with you. I don't want Suh in a Bears uniform. Do you think that Suh still can be a difference maker on the defensive side of the ball?
Yeah, he is. He's probably an above average starter, but stay away from Chicago.
Yeah. Yep. The Green Bay Packers are signing Jimmy Graham to a 3-year deal that'll bring a solid weapon for Aaron Rodgers. I'm sure he's happy about that. And we'll have to deal with Jimmy Graham twice a year. But on top of that, they released wide receiver Jordy Nelson, which was also Aaron Rodgers' favorite target. So I don't know how happy he is about that. I'm happy about it. And then the Packers also signed defensive tackle Muhammad Wilkerson. Gavin, what do you think of the Packers' moves here?
I think the Wilkerson move was a really solid one. They need some help on their defense. The Jimmy Graham one, I don't know the details of that contract, but as long as they didn't overpay him, I think it's a good move.
Mm-hmm.
We saw last year that he still has the ability to make some plays when he was there in Seattle. The Jordy Nelson release isn't terribly surprising, given that he was going to cost them about $12.5 million in cap space. He'll be 33 this next season. He's been dealing with injuries a bit more regularly lately. But the fact that he is still Rodgers' favorite receiver is a little bit perplexing that they would get rid of him after he already this offseason was disappointed in the release of the quarterback coach that they had. You'd think that you'd try and keep your all-pro quarterback satisfied.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised at all if we see Jordy re-signed with the Packers this offseason for a smaller amount than what he was getting paid. I think that he's too important to Rodgers to just let him go. So we'll see if that happens, or I think he still has something left in the tank. And he might be able to go to a true contender this offseason. Get one more ring.
Yeah, Stoyo, do you think that Muhammad Wilkerson and Jimmy Graham are big moves, and do you think the Bears can find a way to beat Green Bay this year, or is that another pretty good team coming into the North?
Well, they definitely got a good tight end for Rodgers, which is what he needed. Nelson is an older receiver, and at 33, making that much money, you kind of have to make a move.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm never a huge fan of facing Aaron Rodgers in the division because he's been destroying us the past few years. So hopefully we can do something, and this time he'll have better weapons, I think. And this is against the Packers' way we've seen in the past few years since Ted Thompson was in office.
Yep.
This is the first time I've seen in a really long time the Packers be so aggressive on the first day of free agency.
Yeah, and I'm not looking forward to seeing Jimmy Graham twice a year. Aaron Rodgers is already an almost impossible to defend, and you bring a guy like Jimmy Graham. You saw the success that he had with Breeze and even with Russell Wilson, and you give him a guy like Aaron Rodgers, and I'm sure he's going to put up big numbers. Gavin, the Lions made some moves. For example, signing linebacker Devin Kennard to a 3-year, $18 million deal. Also keeping corner Nevin Lawson on a 2-year, $9 million deal. What do you think of the Lions' move so far in free agency?
I'm relatively pleased with the moves they've made, over the last few hours. I think that the Nevin Lawson and the Tavon Wilson moves were solid. We definitely needed to keep Tavon there, or we need to fill a new starter safety role. But he's only getting signed for 2 years, $7 million, so that's a good deal for the player of his talent, especially if he can go back to what he was 2 years ago before he had a shoulder injury. And Lawson can definitely be a good corner for us. Again, if he can come back to his form from 2 years ago. The other signings, Christian Jones and
Phone disconnected.
Devin Kennard, I'm not completely sold on those yet. I don't know those players super well, but from my understanding, they might have been slightly overpaid from some reports from people that know him a little bit more than I do. But we also have a head coach now who has been using unknown or underused players on his team, there in the Patriots and on his defense, and been able to get something out of them that other coaches and teams couldn't. So I'm going to give Patricia the benefit of the doubt this time around, even though he wouldn't pay Richard Sherman. But for now, I guess we'll see.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what other moves they make going forward as well. Stoyo, the Broncos signed quarterback Case Keenum to a 2-year, $36 million deal. to go with that defense. And do you think that he's an upgrade from what they had before? And do you think that that makes the Broncos at least contenders in the division with a guy like Keenum?
Absolutely, he's definitely better than what they had. It makes them a contender in the division. I don't know if that makes them a contender for the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I would definitely give that money to Keenum, give him 2 years and see what he can do.
Yeah, I agree.
I like that move for sure.
Yeah, Gavin, you think that's a good fit?
Yeah, I do think that's a good fit. And I like that they didn't overpay him too much. They gave him 2 years, $36 million. So that's like Mike Lennon money right there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's pretty solid for a guy that this year obviously was good, but in years past hadn't been able to break into the starter role. So I think it was a smart move by Denver to kind of pay him a show us what you can do contract. Be interesting now to see what they do in the draft, if they choose to draft a young quarterback or whether they just plan on riding Keenum for the next couple of years. Because if Keenum can play like he did this last season, then if you draft a quarterback at 4th or 5th, I think, is that where they're at?
I think so.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, so if you draft someone at 5 and Keenum turns out to be, it wasn't just a flash in the pan, this is what we saw this last year is who he really is, then at that point you're stuck with 2 starting quarterbacks or a rookie quarterback that never turns into, is able to live up to his potential, and you've wasted a first-round pick essentially. So signing someone like Keenum, I think, is really interesting as far as the draft goes and what they do. And what they end up deciding to do could be really telling as far as what they think of Keenum as a long-term answer.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to me. The Elway has been pretty enamored with the big, tall quarterback, and Keenum doesn't really fit that mold. But I think that that's their backup plan when they couldn't get Cousins, and it's not a bad backup plan, not a bad fallback. And I agree, I would draft a quarterback, whether it be at 5th or trade back or do something, and use him the same way as Glennon, a bridge quarterback, and build for the future. But in the meantime, Keenum can win games, and who knows how far they can go with him. The Cowboys corner Orlando Scandrick has requested his release. Running back Jonathan Stewart is expected to sign with the Giants. And the Redskins are signing wide receiver Paul Richardson to a 5-year, $40 million deal. Stoyo, do you think Paul Richardson is a good fit in D.C. to go with Alex Smith?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I think they overpaid him slightly, but he's a decent player and would give Alex Smith one more weapon. So I'm a fan of that signing.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he does as more of a featured receiver there than in Seattle. Gavin, the Titans are signing cornerback Malcolm Butler to a 5-year, $61 million deal with more than $30 million guaranteed. Safe to say they probably would have played Butler in the Super Bowl. They're also, they're building around former Pats in Tennessee. They're bringing in Butler. They got Logan Ryan there, so that's their secondary. And then the Titans also bring in running back Dion Lewis to a 4-year deal. 5 years, 61 with $30 million guaranteed. Gavin, that sounds like a lot for a guy who kind of fell out of graces in New England last year. Do you think this is a smart move by Tennessee?
Oh, definitely. I'm not sure exactly why he was benched. I'm not sure that we'll ever know. But that $61 million over 5 years rounds out to be about just over $12 million a year, which for a cornerback of his talent, I think is definitely worth it. You saw some of the other guys we talked about tonight getting bigger deals for older, more injury-prone guys that even if they're on the same level, those things alone don't that make Butler's contract look like a good deal versus the $15-16 million that these guys are getting. So I think it's a good move by them. they're helping shore up their secondary, which they struggled with defending the passes last year. So they had a good defensive line. They were pretty high up on the run stuffing defense. So now they've shored up their secondary, at least on paper, and they've given a new weapon to replace DeMarco Murray as a receiver out of the backfield for Marcus Mariota. So
Yeah.
Derrick Henry, he only caught, I think, 11 passes this last season, so I wouldn't consider him a receiving back. And so now Deion Lewis, they have a guy that's can catch passes out of the backfield, but also is versatile enough to run between the tackles as well. So smart moves by the Titans GM.
Yeah, Stoyo, you said before that you didn't necessarily agree with hiring who the Titans get? Mike Vrabel?
Mike Vrabel.
Yeah, and but he's a defensive guy and seems to be building Tennessee around those corners, Logan Ryan and Malcolm Butler. Do you think that could be successful and get Tennessee's defense better?
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting to see that the Patriots that go away from New England end up signing a lot of the Patriots players.
Yeah.
Do the same thing at their new location. But yeah, I think those were some solid moves, and hopefully I'm wrong about Mike Vrabel.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. The Jaguars signed guard Andrew Norwell to a $66.5 million deal. That's the highest paid offensive lineman in league history. Jacksonville linebacker Paul Posluszny announces his retirement after 11 seasons in the NFL at age 33. And the Jaguars intend to sign wide receiver Dante Moncrief, trying to replace Allen Robinson, but I don't know how well of a job that does. Gavin, the Bills trade starting left tackle Cordy Glenn to the Bengals. Glenn was limited to just 5 games in 2017 with foot and ankle problems, but is expected to be ready for training camp. It's interesting to me that the Bills make the playoffs for the first time in 17 years and then trade away starting quarterback and their starting left tackle. But the Bills seem pretty intent on moving up in the draft. They moved from the 21st pick to the 12th pick and are expected and trying to move up into the top 5 before the draft. The Bills are also keeping defensive tackle Kyle Williams on a 1-year deal, and they signed defensive tackle Star Lotulelei on a 5-year deal. Gavin, do you agree with the Bills' moves here?
Yeah, I think there's some solid moves. When trading Cordy Glenn, they move up from the 21st overall pick this year to the 12th, so they're getting a little bit of additional value from their draft pick. So now they'll have the 12th, 22nd, 53rd, 56th, and 65th picks,
Nice.
which are a lot of picks, really high for them. So I think they've got a lot of opportunity to shore up their team on both sides, including replacing Cordy Glenn, who's a talented player, certainly. And they definitely upgraded their offensive line there after losing the guard that you just mentioned, Andrew something.
Norwell?
I cannot remember. Yes.
No, yeah.
So, oh, no, he wasn't. He was a Panther. Sorry, never mind.
Oh, okay.
The wrong guy. But anyways, yes, I think it was a smart move. They obviously are in some semblance of a rebuilding mode. If their starting quarterback right now, I believe, is the mighty Nathan Peterman. It was clear last season that they weren't sold on Taylor by putting Peterman in, even when Taylor wasn't playing that poorly, and they were on track to make the playoffs with him. So I think that they're looking to rebuild and want some cheap pieces, and you do that through the draft. So if that's what their goal is, I think they definitely made some solid moves.
Yeah, I agree. Stoyo, what do you think of the Bills' moves? Do you think it's good? I mean, they just made the playoffs, for the first time in a while, but they seem to be going quickly into rebuild mode here. Do you think that that's the right move? And do you think that they can find a quarterback and build around them and get the ship turned around and get contending for the playoffs again pretty quickly?
Mission accomplished, guys. We just made the playoffs. Let's rebuild.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
I mean,
I'll give him credit for getting a third-round pick for their QB.
Yeah,
Because I thought he was just going to be released.
yeah.
So just getting the third-round pick is a great value. But besides that, I don't know. I would have tried to kept growing and not totally rebuild. But if you're trying to move up to a top 5 and draft a QB, I guess that's what you have to do. But I would have kept the team around, the same team around longer. You made the playoffs the first time in over almost 2 decades. So I would have held the whistle, but to have a new coach, maybe he wants to build his team through his own vision, and clearly Tyrod Taylor was not included there. So he
Yeah,
went in a different direction.
what do you guys think about that? Tyrod Taylor, he leads the team to the playoffs. They go 9-7. He did get benched mid-season. They got a guy like Shady McCoy there. Tyrod Taylor doesn't seem to get a lot of respect in the league. He seems to bounce around and isn't really considered a franchise quarterback. Why do you think that is?
I think that it's very similar to Alex Smith.
Uh-huh.
I think that he's viewed as a competent quarterback, a quarterback that won't lose you a lot of games, but also won't win you a lot of games, by himself. And so I think that he's not viewed as someone that can take you over, take you to the next step. And I think that might be why the Bills are looking to move on from him, and why they were willing to play Nathan Peterman, because they knew they weren't going to keep Taylor. He wasn't their future, and so they needed to see what they had, in this young guy. So
Yeah.
I would say that that's probably why people view that about Taylor. Obviously, I don't know for sure, but I think that they didn't view Taylor as their future, and so they wanted to use him to get some more picks, quite possibly, like Stoyo alluded to trade up into the top few picks this season. All those picks that I'd mentioned earlier, those 2 first rounders and the second rounders, those all equal about the first overall pick is on the trade value chart. So I'm not saying that that's what they're trying to do, is move up to number 1, but they could use all those picks and all that draft capital to move up in the draft and pick somebody in the top 5. Look to someone like possibly the Giants, who or the Colts, that are needing a quarterback, and might be willing to trade out of there.
Yeah, that's interesting. What do you think, Stoyo? Are you on the same belief, or do you think Taylor's a guy you can build around?
I think he's a bridge QB.
Yeah.
And yeah, he's not an elite talent, but I would have had him over Mike Glennon for sure last year.
Yeah, definitely. If he's a bridge quarterback, he's not a bad one.
No. He's serviceable in my opinion.
Yeah. And all right, well, we saved the best for last. Let's talk about the great Chicago Bears real quick. Stoyo, I'm sure you're happy with these moves. Wide receiver Allen Robinson comes to Chicago on a 3-year, $42 million deal. Before being signed, Robinson said on the possibility of playing in Chicago, quote, "That's a team that I've heard as far as people talking about being interested in with me. From what I've heard about Chicago, I heard it's an amazing city, an amazing football town. So I'm excited to get a guy like Allen Robinson in here. That should help a lot with Mitch Trubisky's development. We also signed a tight end, Trey Burton, to a 4-year, $32 million deal. And last year we had lots of issues at the kicking position, and we addressed that bringing in Cody Parkey from the Dolphins, who in 23 field goal attempts last season only missed 2. And then on top of that, we bring in another wide receiver, Taylor Gabriel, to a 4-year deal. Stoyo, do you like these moves? And it's nice to see an aggressive Ryan Pace here.
Yeah, this is Pace's 4th offseason, so he finally decided to make a splash in the free agency.
Yeah.
So finally he's making some moves that I do like, that make sense on paper. My only worry about Robinson is that he is coming off an ACL injury.
and it's kind of a gamble, especially since we have had a lot of injuries at that position.
Yep.
But if he is completely healed, that would be a great signing at a reasonable price of $13 million per season. And 2 years ago, he had a great season, and he's an amazing route runner, which is something we have not had since Alshon Jeffrey left the building.
Yeah.
We're finally getting some weapon for Trubisky. People are wanting to sign him to Chicago, which is good to hear. We have a new kicker, which was very, very frustrating since Robbie Gould was sent home.
Yep.
Unexpected. Yeah, finally something to get excited about.
Hey.
After adding some good coaching.
Yeah. A far cry from where we were, in the middle of the season last year when we had Fox and we had Loggins and we were dealing with Glennon. I think that we're much happier right now where we're at, and we're seeing some bright, some good signs, some building to the future. Gavin, you said before that you were hoping Allen Robinson wouldn't go to Chicago. What do you think about these moves? Do you think that makes Chicago able to contend in the division? Or are they a few moves yet away from that?
I think they're still probably a few moves away, but definitely moving in the right direction, getting some weapons for your young quarterback so that his development isn't hindered. As a Chicago fan, I would hope that Allen Robinson didn't get signed just to hang out with Kevin White on the bench.
Yeah, right.
Nursing their legs.
Yep.
But I think he's a very talented receiver. He did have a down year after his the 1 year that he had his solid year, and there's been some concerns about his lethargy. But he also, I think, was working with an inferior quarterback in Blake Bortles. Then I think there's a lot more hope there in Trubisky. So I think that's a good signing. Trey Burton and Taylor Gabriel as well. Some solid role players. Burton was pretty good statistically for the Eagles, even though he was behind Brent Selleck and Zach Ertz. He still caught 5 touchdowns. So I think he might be a good red zone threat, good replacement for Zach Miller, who it was sad to see him his career end the way that it did. But a good, hopefully reliable pass catcher for your young quarterback, and definitely could shake things up there in the NFC North. There might not be a consensus bottom feeder.
Yeah, that's all we can ask as Bears fans. Get out of the bottom of the division and at least be competitive. That's what we wanted to see. We're tired of getting blown out by teams like Green Bay and even Detroit last year. At least be competitive. At least be in it. Let's improve our win total by a couple, and let's see what we can do next year. Fun fact on Trey Burton, I remember watching him playing quarterback at Florida a few years back, but now he's turned into a pretty serviceable tight end. Stoyo, the Bears have some decisions to make ahead of Friday. Friday is when these contracts would kick in. Tight end Deion Sims would be $4 million guaranteed. Corner Marcus Cooper would be $2 million guaranteed. And then Kyle Long will get a $5 million roster bonus. Are you thinking Sims and Cooper need to get out of town?
Sims and Cooper need to be cut.
Yeah. Save some money.
And you don't want to have to deal with that mess. Cooper should have been cut when he fumbled that return.
Yeah.
Right before the end zone. They should have cut him on the field. And he basically disappeared for the rest of the season. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Deion Sims had an off year.
I was expecting a lot more out of Sims.
20%. Yeah. It didn't work out for him, and it just keeps reminding me of how horrible of an offseason Pace had last year.
Yep.
Every multiple deals he gave, you need to pretty much cut him this offseason. So.
Yep. Stoyo, I'm gonna say Well, do you have, based on these moves and going into the draft, do you have your eyes on somebody that you would like to see the Bears draft?
Yes, I would like to draft Quentin Nelson, the guard from Notre Dame,
Yeah.
at 8.
Yep. I am.
Hopefully that happens. And I also have a Chubb for Bradley Chubb.
I'm right there with you on the Nelson. He seems like a mauler lineman. I want a guy like that. I want a guy that is going to move bodies around and be an impact on the line, similar to a guy like Olin Kreutz, who we had before. I would love to get Quentin Nelson in Chicago. That would fit our identity really well, especially with our backs of Jordan Howard and Tariq Cohen. Gavin, do you have any eyes on who you would like the Lions to draft?
We really need another cornerback to start across from Darius Slay. I just don't know that there's going to be anyone where we're drafting that's going to be worthwhile.
Yeah.
We still need some help. We signed these 2 linebackers, which shores up, at least on paper, some needs that we have. But it'll be interesting to see if we look at that position. But I think that the best case for us, or the best choice, will be to go with just best player available at that point. Outside of maybe some positions like or even wide receiver, I wouldn't be completely opposed to, because I believe Golden Tate's contract is up after this year. So we'll need to have a replacement for them after this year anyways. So we need some offensive line depth. We definitely struggled this year when we lost Taylor and the guard out of Wisconsin, whose name I can't remember. So yeah, we definitely need some help. Ricky Wagner, that's his name.
Oh, okay.
So if we can get some help there, and a pass rusher, we definitely need to. There's a lot of positions where we need some depth or some help at. I don't think there's any one position where we have nothing at, but we definitely need to strengthen the majority of each of positions on defense, especially.
Yeah.
And a running back, but I don't want to spend a first rounder on a running back unless for some crazy reason Barkley is there. But let's not kid ourselves.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it goes. Another great week of podcasting. This is only day 1 of free agency, so I'm sure there'll be more moves to come. We'll be back next week. We've got some big guests on the way soon. Any day we should have a big interview coming up. We appreciate all of the listeners. Don't forget to subscribe, like, or leave a comment. Thanks, guys, for coming on. Great success on another episode. And we'll be back next week. Have a great week, guys.
Thanks for having me on.
Yep.
Thanks again.
Peace out.